Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Thank you for listening to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for the Free Press, joined by my colleague, Reiner Sabin. He is our Big Ten insider. That's even better than it normally is, given this is the rivalry week. Michigan versus Michigan State, set to battle in East Lansing for the first time as a night game, Reiner. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a poor timing for NBC to get the bad luck of the draw in this situation because Michigan is 24-point favorites against Michigan State, and so not many people are expecting a competitive matchup, and so that means for not great TV experience for NBC, but it is what it is, and it would have been better, or it was assumed to be better go after last year. A lot of people thought that, this matchup would have been very intriguing based off the incident that happened last year.
Well, that's right. The buzz certainly was there last year. The teams were lopsided in terms of talent and where they were. Like, people weren't really expecting a close game last year. In some ways, Michigan State keeping it 29-7 was really closer than the game was in a lot of ways, and some picked it to be. Did the spread close at like 22.5 last year? I think people are talking like this is this big historic spread. I'm pretty sure it was right around that the same number last year. But to your point and the greater point about just the NBC getting in this first night game, I guess the first night game in East Lansing, the first time in the new TV package and everything, there is just less juice than other years, and that's surprising, especially like you said, given the way last year ended. So we'll talk about that. Why we think that is, just the teams headed in a couple opposite directions, and really have we looped back all the way back, made it full circle to those 1990s seasons, which is sort of the path that feels like Michigan State is on, right? That national championship trajectory.
Yeah, and so again, it starts with the kind of the context with the tunnel fight that happened at the end of last year. A lot of people thought that was the ugliest chapter in the rivalry yet, and many were predicting that this year would be influenced by that, or this year's matchup would be influenced by that. But the rhetoric coming out of both sides has been pretty muted. Nobody's really talking about the tunnel, and the fan base, at least as far as MSU, that seemed like they wanted retribution at one point right after the incident, after the suspensions of 8 Michigan State players, criminal charges that were filed. All the back and forth that happened, both sides seemed to be aggrieved coming out of that game, the 29-7 Michigan win in October of 2022, and ever since then, it's just slowly, as the two teams have become separated in the standings, and one's gone north and the other one's gone south, all that fury has died down.
Yeah. And as happens in life, I think at least a little bit of it, I mean, probably the majority is just how far apart these teams are, right? That probably is the vast majority of it. But time sort of heals all. At least that's what Jim Harbaugh claims, right? I mean, the first question he was asked on Monday was about how to keep the rivalry in check and not let things from last year just sort of boil into this year, right? And I mean, he tapped dance all around it. He never even addressed anything about the tunnel, the incident. He just said, yeah, we always make schematic changes week to week. It's a big game. I mean, he we'll write notes about just to make sure as he's going. And one of the notes I wrote, and I heard someone else actually write, was how he just did not answer the question. So don't reference back to this, because he did not answer the question that was asked, which is why I tried to double down and ask him just about why are you not thinking about it more, talking about it more? And I guess what he said is it feels like a long time ago. And I don't know if it's because Michigan has tried to win a national championship, lost, and reascended since then. If it's because Michigan State's coach, who he said did not contact him, right? Like Mel Tucker and Jim Harbaugh were said to never have really had a lot of contact after. I don't know about it. Like he said there was no apology sort of thing. That coach is no longer there. Mel Tucker is gone. Michigan State has lost 4 in a row. And so it's just, if you remember the fury with which Jim Harbaugh took that stage or that podium after the game last year, right? And then the press conference the next day, it's just amazing. Not like I'm applauding, like I'm not like so amazed that someone could do it. It's just really shocking how far the pendulum has swung from peak emotion to just, we remember, but that's not what we're thinking about.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, and Harbaugh was a big actor in that whole thing. I mean, some of the stuff he said, fanned some of the flames, and obviously, calling for, possibly, the authorities to look into the incident and such, and the kind of the swift justice idea and such, and it was not a pleasant episode for anybody. And a lot of people were calling for maybe a pause in the rivalry. And organically, that's kind of what we are getting because, MSU has kind of done its part to cool the fervor, so to speak, because they just haven't done well. I mean, MSU's fans have, by and large, checked out this season. I mean, they're pretty despondent about the state of the program, which is understandable given what has happened. And they're not really looking in, going into this game as with any optimism or really any fire about, getting some kind of revenge against Michigan. And it was not something that would have been the case coming right out of that game in 2022 last October. So, yeah, I think it's interesting how it just kind of naturally cooled down, partially because of MSU's struggles and Michigan being so much far above them, and kind of continuing on its path and ascension since their loss in 2022. I mean, in 2021 to Michigan State. It's been 19 straight Big Ten wins. MSU has gone 6-13 against Power 5 teams since that 2021 victory over Michigan. So it's been a totally different. They've kind of gone to the opposite ends of the spectrum, essentially, and I think that's been actually good for the rivalry and kind of keeping it in check. This year especially.
Yeah, no, we talked about it. 22 straight regular season wins since that day. And it was funny. We were talking to Blake Corum about it on Monday. And it's just, there's a number of things that's different about that game, right? Because it's actually the only game that Michigan will bus to, right? They will drive up there. They'll bus up, bus back instead of chartering. And someone asked him about just getting in the zone, right? The difference. I mean, players are very regimented, and it's very different. Like, I don't know what they do if they get dressed in Ann Arbor, and then, I mean, probably not. And then like drive up there, like you probably, I mean, I'm sure, like, okay, not to that level, right? But wait,
they're not getting on the
it's not high school. It's not high school. Yeah, you're getting dressed in your own locker room. But what I mean is, and I guess it's a night game as well. But what I'm saying is, say it's a noon game, right? And that's not the case this year. But a noon game that you're busing up there for, although they stay at the Marriott the night before. So I guess we've sort of worked that out. That was well done. But the point is, it is different, right? And Blake Corum was saying that he doesn't even remember like the mentality of getting up there and busting down. But what he does remember is after that loss, just how silent the bus ride was. Coming back, he said he went straight to the gym at Schembechler and worked out. And that really feels very telling about how serious Michigan took that, and just, I mean, where the program could have gone from such a deflating moment to where it has since then. It can't be overstated, right? Because every single other season, the winner of the Michigan State game every other year since 2000, I believe, at least has finished with a better record and has had the upper hand, right? Like, you're the one, especially in the Big Ten championship game era, the legends and leaders, all the way back to in the divisional era, the winner of that game has finished ahead, right? Yet Michigan did not implode in 2021, flipped the script, and proved it that first season. And since that day, has just ridden the momentum. And I think it was important because you wrote about now looking back on that day, right? In 2021, and how what an anomaly that day really was.
Well,
not the result, but how the result happened.
Yeah, right. I mean, they had a 16-point lead with 21 minutes left and blew it, which is not common for a team now that dominates the second half. I mean, I think Michigan's outscored opponents in the second half this season 131-17. 93-0 in the third quarter. They committed 8 penalties in that game. Michigan now commits roughly a little bit more than 2, which leads the nation.
That's a month's worth of penalties.
They committed. Yeah, essentially, yes, exactly. And they committed 2 back-breaking turnovers in the final minutes, which helped MSU overtake them, and then killed off the Michigan comeback. Now they have a very +7 turnover margin, which is ranks, I think, 9th in the country. I mean, it's a much different team. They execute far better. If you remember in that game, Michigan didn't handle tempo very well from a defensive standpoint. They also gave up 37 points in that game. Michigan now has a really good scoring defense, and they don't really make those kind of same mistakes. I think the defense, as it's progressed in year 3, they now have answers to everything. Chris Partridge talked about that this year. I mean, they don't get flummoxed by teams, no matter what they do, no matter what mode they're going. I mean, Michigan has played tempo teams this year. They played them, East Carolina was one of them. I mean, you didn't see them getting, caught off sides or doing any of the stuff that they were doing on that day against Michigan State in 2021. And again, just they have perfected their systems in the time since. MSU, in contrast, has repeatedly shot itself in the foot, done, stupid things, blown leads, committed all sorts of turnovers, has had a very leaky defense. They gave up 713 yards to Washington earlier this season. It's been a kind of steady fall for them in that time since. And Michigan, again, has gone the complete opposite direction during that time, has gotten better and stronger in pretty much every area since that game.
Well, just look at the coaching staffs, right, and the stability of them, and you're talking about what Chris Partridge said, right, and just how fundamental, how sound, and how crisp everything is. It's not just the defensive unit, right? Like that was the unit that had the problems that day in East Lansing when the 12 men on the field and right and just getting caught off. With tempo, certainly, but it's just their understanding. Like Sharon Moore was talking about it today, right? Michigan gave up 3 sacks in the first 8 plays against Indiana, which, I mean, is very striking. One of them, I don't know if that's going to stay as a stack. JJ was really scrambling and he was kind of tripped up, but 2 sacks in the first 2 drives, let's call it, right? And they had given up the fewest sacks through in the country through 6 games. And Sharon Moore was like, yeah, Indiana they'd come off a bye week. They'd reverted to a few things. They caught us off guard. But as soon as we locked onto it and figured it out, it was picked up. Nothing happened again, right? And I think that's sort of to your point that and that's why they're not committing penalties. It's why they're not shooting themselves in the foot, even when they are caught off guard. Like that's what can beat a team, right? When you just can't make that adjustment. Michigan is not only better and usually well prepared. Should you have the upper hand and exploit them how Michigan State did 2 years ago, that's not happening anymore. That cannot happen. They're too senior. They're too veteran led. They have too much talent and too much knowledge in too many places.
True. And the MSU, in contrast, I think lost sight of what they should have done, I guess, after that win. They didn't really seize the moment. I talked to our producer, Andrew Birkle, about that. And I think that Ohio State loss was really huge for MSU in 2021. I think it made Mel Tucker obsessed with trying to beef up the pass rush. And in turn, they kind of neglected the run defense, which was not a good idea against Michigan. And so I think they figured that, we beat Michigan, now our real enemy is Ohio State. And then it turns out that, again, Michigan beat Ohio State right after Ohio State blasted MSU in that 2021 season. And yet, Mel Tucker, because he felt like, we beat Michigan that year. We can, the real enemy is Ohio State because of just how, strong their passing attack was. And so, they really committed again towards the pass rush thing. And then now this year, they've kind of focused more on trying to stop the run because that's Michigan's proven to be the top team in the conference. And so all teams are kind of accounting for Michigan's strengths now. And so they lost a year, I think, in some of their strategy because Mel Tucker made the wrong guess on which team was really the strongest team in the Big Ten. He thought it was Ohio State, but in reality, it's Michigan.
Well, it certainly is, or it certainly appears to be, right? At least over the last couple of years. But I don't know. I mean, you would know better than me, certainly. So I guess I had never thought about it that way or seen it that way. And being in the business of defending Mel Tucker is certainly not the business anybody wants to be in. But I just wonder if at the time, Ohio State has the more common nationally successful blueprint, right? It's more a la SEC teams and that type of thing. Whereas the way Michigan is having success, Jim Harbaugh's method is very fly in your face of what Ohio State has done and Bama and Georgia. There are certain things, having lots of talent and winning in the trenches, but I'm talking about big skill receivers, right? And flying around on the outside. That's different. And Michigan State at that time, now it appears to have been very smoke and mirrors, but Michigan State was 11-0, 11-1 until that. They finished 11-2, not 11-0. They were 11-2. But I meant they were 10-1 at one point. Thank you. And so at that time, it's also transfer portal era. It's all glitz and glamour. He's signing the new contract. They think they're on the rise, but I think you're right. They guessed wrong.
Yeah,
right? But is it the wrong guess? Everything went wrong. It's not. I don't know if it was just the one thing, right? Because they bring in Brandon Jordan. I don't know. You explain it. Everything.
I feel like they saw that they weren't going to be able to get pressure on CJ Stroud in that game, and and they saw them the receivers running free, and they felt like Ohio State obviously presented maybe more difficulty to them than Michigan, which you would assume based off of the two results. That's really was the case. 50-67 loss against Ohio State, 37-33 victory over Michigan. Yeah, and they thought maybe Michigan didn't have the staying power, that this was going to be a one-time deal with them, and it ended up being that Michigan, beat Ohio State right after. Again, Ohio State crushed Michigan State that year in 2021, then did it again last year during a year when they really tried to improve the pass rush, but I think they neglected the run defense, which, again, if you watch the 29-7 loss by Michigan State to Michigan last year, I mean, they couldn't stop the run. That was part of the reason. Michigan was just able to kind of grind them into the dust. And
they grinded everybody into the dust last year. But here might be the last point before we go on to our final point. Whether Michigan State was trying, maybe like, I'm not saying maybe, like, you could very well be right that Michigan State made the wrong play trying to chase Ohio State. Whether they were trying to chase Michigan, I think the argument is, or the point could be made, both of those teams are just in wildly different stratospheres. You know what I mean? So what difference would it have made?
Because one's more translatable, I think, to the Big Ten. Like trying to, I mean, a lot of teams are a lot more able to stop. I mean, stopping the run is probably the number one thing you have to do in the Big Ten. I mean, so I guess Ohio State is an outlier, and they're also a byproduct of their huge talent advantage. I mean, their whole recruiting advantage. I mean, they have a huge recruiting advantage even over Michigan. But the thing is that Michigan style is tough to play against if you're just getting whipped at the line of scrimmage, which happens to be the case for a lot of the Big Ten teams. The last 19 that really have faced Michigan have been whipped generally at the line of scrimmage. And so Ohio State is among those teams that got whipped, you know?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's hard to advocate more for building through the trenches. Like, I would love that to be like my presidential slogan, just because it's just so important. So I'm with you, which I guess brings us almost full circle to that question when we talk about where Michigan State is and where Michigan is right now. Is it back to the late 90s? And do you think is it now, or will it be? Is that the direction we're heading in?
I mean, it feels like it. I mean, with the fact that again in the late 90s, I mean, Michigan kind of was the dominant program. I mean, Nick Saban was fighting against that at MSU, and there was a possibility that in 1999 that there was going to be a turning point. Didn't really happen because Saban left for LSU, and then you had the Bobby Williams era, and that kind of just reinforced, that the dominance over Michigan. It wasn't until D'Antonio came in that changed the tenor of the entire rivalry. But now it seems like we're kind of getting back to that point because, I mean, Michigan is leaps and bounds better than Michigan State right now. They've got all the buzz and the attention. Nobody's talking about MSU. Everybody's talking about Michigan as a national title contender. They've attracted interest from recruits nationally. It's left MSU in a very vulnerable position as it relates to the rivalry. I mean, who knows what direction they're going to go? Obviously the next coaching decision is going to be huge for them. Can they get another D'Antonio, or are they going to get another Bobby Williams or John L. Smith? I mean, it's like, and the decision is going to ultimately influence like whether they're going to be able to compete with Michigan. Now, Michigan, we don't know what their future holds because obviously the schedule, and yes, Jim Harbaugh being the big question: is he going to stay, or is he going to go job hunting in the NFL again? We don't know, but if it stays the course the way it is, Harbaugh has got the program to the point that it can sustain itself. Whereas again, MSU is basically starting with a blank slate, presumably next year, and all bets are off about what their future looks like.
This next little window, right? Like obviously this week, but like this year, next year, I mean, certainly this foreseeable future seems to have everything pointed. The arrow is as pointed Michigan as it has been or really could be. However, think about just 2 years ago on this day, what we were saying about Michigan and Ohio State, right? I mean, it had been a decade since Michigan had done it. And sometimes you just got to do it for things to flip. Now, I think you could make the argument Michigan State's probably never had a more important hire given the timing of it as well, right? With the Big Ten expansion, and it just feels like everything is becoming have and have not. And maybe if you are a Michigan State or a Maryland or an Indiana, these teams in the East that have been waiting to not have to play Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State every single year, right? You sort of saw it as maybe an opening for now Michigan and Michigan State is a protected rivalry, so they will see them every year. But you only got to see Ohio State 2 out of 5 years. That sounds pretty good if you're anyone, right? Like it just you like your chances more, and so I think right now it feels pretty 90s, but how fast I'm not predicting it to turn, but it can turn fast. It can turn fast when you don't expect it.
It can turn quickly, but I mean, again, Michigan State's, because of their recruiting footprint, needs it not to get too one-sided, obviously, because they need to recruit Michigan real hard. I mean, Michigan can get away with recruiting a little bit more nationally just because of their brand power in Michigan and whatever the historic relevance you can. But for MSU, it's very important to at least present the idea that you're close to even footing with Michigan, because it's really essential for their recruiting that they're able to get some of those guys here in Michigan that may have the choice between the two programs.
They got to go back to Ohio too. I mean, I think Steve Clinkscale. If you could put your finger on one person who has just flipped everything, from Ohio State to Michigan and Michigan State, all three, Steve Clinkscale. You know what I mean? I mean, Michigan kind of gave up or was not making the same inroads in Ohio in the same way he has dedicated himself. So do you know? You don't?
No, I agree. No, I mean, I think Clinkscale, I mean, has been very helpful, obviously, for their Ohio recruiting connection.
And it's a triple action, right? It's like when Michigan calls the Big Ten wins 2, like when you beat a Big Ten team, right? Like you win 1 and they lose 1. It's like, well, that's actually just how it works. But it's like, that's why those head-to-head recruiting flips, like a Rayshon Benny, when you were asking him the other day, it's just all those head-to-heads.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when you're falling behind on the field, that sometimes translates into recruiting. And it's particularly essential for MSU because they recruit more regionally. And, they can't necessarily rely. I don't know if they want to rely on some of these guys that are, far off either. I mean, we're, especially in the age of the transfer portal, I don't know if any program should want to do that. I mean, again, even Michigan, I think it's dangerous to recruit guys from California and some of those warmer weather states because, the first sign of adversity that they face, or they're not getting playing time, now with the transfer portal and the one-time free transfer, you can just go right back to the, where you came from a lot easier than you would prior to the advent of that legislation. So I think, especially for northern programs, but particularly for MSU, they need to recruit very much regionally, and that's why winning this game for them is really important. And trying to get this series back to even footing is essential for their future.
Right. Well, I guess the series is on relatively even footing, but where it is in this series right now,
the last 15 right? In the context of the last 15 years, it is, yes, but right now it doesn't feel like it.
But it couldn't feel less like that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's 3-2 Michigan in the last 5. Certainly, I guess. Let's see if we think it's going to be 4-2 Michigan. We'll take a break. We'll get back. That way we can bring Andrew in. We'll get to the picks, or see if Michigan State will pull off another 3-touchdown upset of Michigan. We'll be right back with Hell Yes. All right. Like we promised, we are back with the picks. Another 4-pack for you this week. But first, we got to bring in Andrew Birkle, check in on him, see how he's doing, so he can refresh us on how we all did last week. What's up, Andrew?
How's it going, fellas? Should be a big week, but you guys broke it down excellently there as far as what all the going-ons and whatnot here for Michigan State. So
I guess I was raising my hand, Andrew. Do you have anything to add about where we left things on the other side of the break? I know this is poor podcasting, but I mean, it's always hard to bring you in. No, I wasn't calling you out. Just, I know you're very plugged in as well. What do you think about just quickly as we lead into this Michigan State topic and the pick today? What are your thoughts? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean it's like you guys hit the nail on the head in my opinion, where it's just like, I guess the crazy part was about that 2021 victory for Michigan State was it felt so much bigger than one game, because it felt like, okay, Michigan State lost a legendary coach. They lost Mark D'Antonio, who really flipped the rivalry on its head. And then after he leaves, 2020 was basically a wash. In Michigan State did win, but it was that game didn't, it was kind of like, whatever, don't want to put too much weight into it. And then 2021, when everything is on the line, Michigan State wins another one. And then you're like, okay, obviously this is the direction it's going to continue to trend. It's impossible to recount all the different mistakes Michigan State has made since then. But to me, the as you guys excellently pointed out, the most interesting element of that was how it affected Michigan as well, because at the time, it felt like another nail in the coffin of the Jim Harbaugh era of him not being able to win the big game. And ever since then, they basically haven't lost besides the college football. No, they literally haven't lost besides the college football playoff. It's impossible, like I said, to add up all the different ways it's gone wrong for Michigan State. And I think to look at this team and say that they're a 2-4 quality team through those first 6 games is not accurate as well. The Washington game, I mean, you want to talk about a game you got to throw out the window. Your coach gets fired midweek. And so that was not an accurate representation of who this Michigan State team is. Maryland, final score, that game was a lot closer than the final score ended up being. So on the field, I think that this Michigan State team is actually a lot better than the team last year in some ways, especially on the defensive end. On the defensive end, I think it's definitely better. I mean, they were completely helpless last year on defense. And throughout the Washington game, like I mentioned, they've actually shown some signs that they can slow teams down. They got Noah Kim out of there, and they've improved. I think they looked better against Rutgers. But this 2-4 record, I don't think is an entirely accurate representation to Michigan State. But I'll get to more on my pick in a minute here about why I don't think
lead us. It sounds like you're picking State. I mean,
no, I'm not. I'm not. But yeah, I was going to say the reason I'm not picking Michigan State is because I'm rolling with the Miami theory that I said last week. Miami and North Carolina played last week after Miami lost the absolute most crippling game they could to Georgia Tech. Their souls were ripped out of their bodies in a lot of ways in that game. Having the undefeated season still going, well, it wasn't as much on the line for Michigan State, but having a win and looking really sharp on the road against Rutgers, a team who actually played Michigan pretty tough, I would have been feeling decent about Michigan State coming into this week. The fans would have been feeling decent. They would have had some confidence going. Instead, it's completely different. And I actually do believe momentum has a pretty big factor in college football, maybe more so than any other sport week to week, where you have to look at those games kind of compiling and leading into each other. And, like I said, there's some talent on this Michigan State team. They have some decent guys, and they've actually been much better, especially at stopping the run this year. I mean, you talk about a team who literally could not stop the run if their lives depended on it last year. Well, that's not necessarily the case this year, but I think Michigan's going to end up covering the spread pretty easily, because as soon as one thing goes wrong, and anyone who's been to Spartans Stadium can attest this, that's kind of like a tense crowd when things aren't going well. You can feel the air go out of the stadium very easily when something goes wrong, especially for a team like this. Everyone's going to be like, oh, I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have come to the game. 45 degrees and rainy. I shouldn't have even come to this game. And you could just see it turning very quickly as soon as there's an interception or a drive down the field that completely sucks the life out of Michigan State. So I am leaning with the Wolverines in this one to cover that spread.
Okay, well, there we have it. I'm glad that we led with you, although we did not get to rehash last week. I now realized. I'll let everyone know
You're like, hey, just please give us
the one time, the first winning week, and we just dive right into it. But I'm just saying that just so people know we're a little hot right now. We were 3-0-1 last week, so feel like we got a decent read on the board. And with that, good news for you, Andrew. I'm also picking Michigan to cover. It just freshman quarterback for Michigan State. He did. Caden Hauser did look to do a pretty good job on the road in some tough conditions against Rutgers last week, but I think he threw 29 times and had 133 total yards. I mean, that's just dink and dunk. You're not going to move the ball with any consistency on Michigan. I think all of their first team defensive touchdowns they've allowed have been 30 yards plus, 40 yards plus. I mean, like, you got to hit him. You got to hit him with a double pass, or you got to hope Mike Sainristil falls down and breaks his cleat, or something like that. That's how teams score. And I mean, Michigan's been waiting for this day. They really have. No matter what they say, that it's not about last year or not about 2021. Michigan State. I mean, both teams like to beat up on the other one when the other one is down. Well, Michigan State is down, and so this is Michigan's chance. So I think Michigan covers.
Real quick, Tony. It sounds like you're calling for the Jay Johnson flea flicker. The flea flicker.
It's gonna get picked. It's gonna get picked off so quick.
Well, you know it's getting called.
Yeah, and Michigan's not even gonna like have anyone even go at Nate Carter, right? Like, it's literally just gonna look like it was a pass rush the entire time.
Yeah.
And so and this is not to discount. Like, I want to be very clear. This game means so much in East Lansing, and like Darian Harris, like one of their coaches and a longtime Spartan. Like, I saw him tweeting about just like Michigan State people and fans like to not be front runners, and just because this is good. There's a very good chance this could get really ugly. And so Mark D'Antonio's back in the building. Reiner, like, can Michigan State? I'm not saying can Michigan State win. Like, I've ruled that out entirely. Can they keep it close for a half?
Yeah, I mean, again, as a matter of principle, I mean, when you're a 24-point underdog at home, I mean, in a rivalry game, I don't know. I'm going to go with Michigan State here. I think that they, can keep it within that margin at least. I don't necessarily think that. Again, like as Andrew alluded to, I mean, they're dreadful across every sector, and they're incompetent completely. I mean, they've done some good things against each of the last two teams they played. Iowa and Rutgers held leads well into the late stages of the game, and then just blew it. And so, I think that they've got some pieces there, especially in the receiver core. Some young players, Deron Glover, Tyrell Henry. I mean, they've got Nate Carter, who's been a strong running back for them. Not quite anywhere close to Kenneth Walker, but better than the Berger-Broussard combo last year. And so, and then I think again the defense has been better. I don't think they're great by any means, but they've got some guys up front that can create issues. And Angelo Gross has been somewhat effective on the back end at times. He's not exactly a ball hawk, but he's got a couple interceptions. I don't think he's reliable necessarily on a down-to-down basis, but they've got some decent pieces across the board, and they've got a field goal kicker who's actually been an asset for them, with Jonathan Kim. Now the rest of the special teams have been pretty atrocious at times. So,
but I guess give me what's a score though? Like, I mean, like 31, not like 31-10. 31.
That's something similar to last year. I mean, like, again, you have to factor in that Michigan only beat them by 22 points last year, and that was at home. This is at Michigan State. So I think MSU should be able to at least come out and keep it within 24 points. And again, I'm not picking them to win. But
Michigan's so much better in the red zone this year than last year, right? Like think about Michigan State they made them settle for what 4 or 5 field goals. And how did Michigan State move the ball last year? Jump ball to Keon Coleman. He's not there.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I mean, like those points are very valid. At the same token, I think that there's some other ways that they can obviously move the ball. Besides just throwing it up to Keon Coleman. I mean, you would hope that Jay Johnson, can come up with a different plan of attack there. I mean, again, they don't. I mean, Caden Hauser is kind of a 4-star passer. I mean, they've got players that were decent recruits and players that have developed into decent options for them. So, I mean, they're not like the. This is not for me. This is not a Michigan. It's not a Michigan State commentary. It's a Michigan commentary, right? I mean, look what Michigan State looks like again. Look what Michigan looks like against Nebraska and Minnesota, and Minnesota, Nebraska, Rutgers, Michigan State. All those teams are the same. Are in that same range, right? Like not great teams. You do some things like certainly not good nationally, but like. Frisky, right? Like you can do a couple things. That doesn't hang against Michigan. We've seen what that looks like against Michigan. And I don't know and normally rivalry you give, especially for Michigan State, like people who've never been around East Lansing clearly don't understand what this game means in East Lansing. I think this year is different. I mean, they have been, how many times can you get up off the mat? You know what I mean? Well, but you can get off the for this one. Get up off the mat, for a game against Michigan. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, again, this is a different game altogether, and so I think, I would hope that Michigan State was not going to just lay down against them. I mean, I don't think that would speak much to their character, nor I don't think that's even reflective of how they played. They've actually stayed in the fight, given all the bad juju that they've had with the Mel Tucker suspension, then it's firing, having to deal with a quarterback change. I think considering all the circumstances, they have done a pretty good job of at least staying competitive. You got to be impressed in that regard, right? Because they didn't bring this on themselves. It's the last point, and then we're gonna move on to the next game. You're right, of course, but again, it's not a Michigan State commentary. Michigan's at a different level. Yeah, I just think they are. You may very well be right, but again, as a matter of principle, it's hard to pick against 20. Right, and you were right about Oklahoma, Texas with that rivalry. You were like I was, and you were right straight up, but you were like definitely with the points. So no, and especially that many. It's like dang, 3 touchdowns. All right, Andrew.
Yeah, moving on. I mean, we could talk about all the different elements of that game for weeks, and it's just there's so many things. I've been saying this all year that there's so many things about Michigan State that make them interesting this year. So that's why it's just like there's so much to talk about. But moving on to another extremely fun game, Ohio State hosting Penn State, 4.5-point favorites. Massive Big Ten implications on the line here for Michigan as well. So, guys, I guess we'll start with Tony. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, this game is at noon, Fox Big Noon kickoff. Before the Michigan State game this week, it was funny. Sharon Moore was asked if he's going to be watching that game. He's like, he's like Jim Harbaugh always said, don't get your emotions in the game. He's like, so I won't be emotionally invested. He said, but my eyeballs will be invested, and so he's going to be watching. The game of the college football week. What I am most interested in watching is Drew Aller against Ohio State's defense, how he deals with pressure, and if he's still able to protect the ball, and if he takes shots downfield at all. I have not looked again this week. I probably should have before this comment, but as of last week, Drew Aller was, I believe, the bottom in the nation in terms of yards per pass attempt. He's incredibly effective, and he has a run game to support him and a defense to support him, and he's very well insulated. But in a game of this magnitude, can he make the throw to win? Is he going to do it? Good news, he doesn't even need to, because I'm getting 4.5 points. So I don't know if he can make the throw to win. This is going to show me if he can. But I think Penn State's defense is good enough to keep us in the game. So I did all that rigmarole to say I'm not sure who wins. It might be Penn State, but I like the points.
Yeah, I am going to pick Penn State just because and I think they picked them not only to cover but also win the game. As far as why, because I think the defense is the difference. I think this is a Manny Diaz versus Brian Hartline, Ryan Day special, and I think they have the advantage across the board defensively in this game. And so, Kyle McCord has been good, but again, he had to really fight it out against Notre Dame, which was another competent defense that they really faced. And so, Penn State's defense is even better, and they've got some particularly good guys in the back end. With the Kyle King or Kalen King? I'm sorry, Kalen King is the one. The other brother from Detroit. So yeah, I think he's
Castech's finest.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. So he's a player that McCord's really going to have to watch out for. Manny Diaz comes up with a lot of different blitz schemes and such. So, and that's been a weakness for Ohio State is the offensive line. So yeah, I think it really favors Penn State, the matchup, and I expect them to go into Columbus and come out with the win, which will set up a very interesting game, presumably with Michigan.
Oh my, that would be massive. Andrew?
Maybe I'm taking crazy pills, but I don't understand the narrative around Ohio State being so negative this year. I mean, they don't have CJ Stroud, so it was always going to be a little bit of an awkward transition going from obviously someone who now we see him in the NFL is a total stud. I mean, any questions around CJ Stroud now have seemingly been answered between the bowl game and him walking right into an NFL locker room and instantly being a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, that was always going to be a tough transition. And, you saw it the first few weeks there. The Maryland game was closer than it probably should have been, but Maryland is not bad. I mean, they continue to put good results on the field. They have a tough offense. USC, comparing that to what they did to what happened to them when they went to Notre Dame, compared to what happened to Ohio State when they played Notre Dame. I mean, now we know that, like, comparing those two games, they blew USC off the field. Do I think USC is a top 5 team in the nation? No, I don't. But I think they're not bad. You see so many teams in college football. Look at Michigan's schedule. Who's as good as USC that they've played? They got blown off the field at Notre Dame. Ohio State went in there and beat them. So I think that both these teams obviously have elite defenses. Ohio State is number 3 in scoring defense. Penn State is number 2, and then Michigan is number 1 in scoring defense, which tells you a little bit about the top of the Big Ten this year. Penn State is number 1 in yards per game by a mile, but OSU is not far behind there either. So ultimately, Ohio State at home, they have Marvin Harrison Jr., who NFL defenses wouldn't even know what to do with Marvin Harrison Jr. Kalen King is about as good as you're going to hope to put against him. But you give me the best player and you give me a home field advantage on a team who I think is, quite frankly, a little bit underrated. So I'm taking the Buckeyes.
Fair enough. It's just, I mean, when you talk about all that defense, it just makes me think close, right? 4.5.
Yeah.
4.5 is a lot. And this next game we're going to talk about is even bigger than that.
No doubt. Yeah. So Tennessee at Alabama, 2 teams who were the juggernauts of the SEC last year outside of Georgia. So this one's been marked in the calendar ever since Tennessee beat Alabama last year. Basically, the one mark on their that was a huge game, probably game of the year last year. So 9.5 point underdogs at Alabama. Reiner, who you got in this one?
I'm taking Alabama. They seem to have studied the ship since the kind of the rough patch that they had between the Texas and South Florida weeks. And the Tennessee is just not nearly as strong as they were last year. Joe Milton, former Michigan quarterback, has looked far worse than Hendon Hooker. And that offense doesn't look nearly as explosive. And Alabama's defense is kind of under Kevin Steele's leadership and has improved significantly from last year. They look like they're kind of getting back to maybe some of the level that they showed in, when they were really rocking and rolling during the late part of last decade. So I think Alabama is not quite anywhere close to the dynasty level program. I mean, they're having to gut out wins, but they've shown that they can, and I think that they'll be able to kind of put Tennessee away in this game, especially coming off the result last year where they lost in Knoxville for the first time and God knows when. I mean, it was a long time since they lost to Tennessee. I mean, so I think that they'll be looking for some kind of retribution in that game. And this is a big rivalry game. They call it, Tennessee Hate Week in Tuscaloosa and vice versa, and not Knoxville. So nobody's going to be sleeping on, no team's going to be sleeping on the other side going into this game. So it's going to be very competitive. But I'm picking Alabama in this one.
Yeah, we know Reiner knows about this one best, and so I am going to follow his lead. Although I'm not just tailing him, I had written this down separately. It's Jalen, and he said it best. Jalen Milroe turned the ball over twice. He threw 2 picks against Texas, and really very costly, right? And then they did the whole quarterback carousel when Saban was really just trying to find someone who's going to protect the ball, move the offense downfield, and sort of go back to the old good Alabama before they had the juggernaut quarterback, just like the game manager quarterback. But then he made it full circle, got in Milroe's head, and is like, yo, just protect the ball and be athletic and just pass it. You're good. And since then they've been good. And so, like Reiner said, nobody forgot what happened last year. Tennessee is nothing like they were last year. I mean, Josh Heupel's offense is very good, but it was supposed to be this like insane revolutionary thing, like Mike McDonald and the Mike McDaniel. I always say that with the Dolphins. I don't know that it is, so I like Alabama.
This one's a tough one, I think personally. I mean, Joe Milton, not good from what we've seen. I mean, he's just shown it time and time again. He's just not the quarterback that Hendon Hooker was per se. 100 total yards passing last week against Texas A&M, but 232 yards on the ground against the same team who held Alabama to 23 yards rushing. So Tennessee is number 6 in the nation, 231 yards per game on the ground. Both Alabama and Texas A&M have pretty comparable run defenses, but Alabama's 18th, A&M is 19th. So it should be a similar type foe. And so I think that, I think Bama is still a little shakier than they have been in years past. And Milroe, who, I mean, talk about an electric runner. I mean, he almost looks like Lamar Jackson, like as a runner when he gets open space. But still, when it comes down to it, you just watch him make mistake here, mistake there. And if Tennessee can control the ball through their rushing attack, I don't know if they win, but I'm going to take the 9.5 points in that one for sure. So it should be an entertaining contrast of the old school rivals and all that stuff. So last game on the schedule here, Utah at USC, another bounce back opportunity here for USC after getting boat raced, quite frankly, against Notre Dame, making Tony quite happy, the USC hater himself. So Tony, we'll let you gloat on this one here. 6.5 point favorites against Utah. I think I can guess who you might take in this one.
No, I mean, I don't hate USC. I just dislike
you can say,
I dislike bad football, and half of their team is really not good. And so I really wasn't surprised. That was not at all surprised. I mean, I guess maybe how out of hand, and the turnover thing really made it get out of hand. But the fact that it was a decided USC loss, I just feel that was the first of many. We've seen what Utah's defense has done earlier this year against UCLA and different games. You're giving me 6.5 points. I mean, I know that on the road at the Coliseum, bounce back game. And for USC, if you are USC, the argument is, look, we dropped the one we could drop, right? We're good. It was non-con. It's Notre Dame. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it's not setting us back at all in the league right now. Let's go do this. But what they don't know is their defense is really bad. So, no, Utah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Utah as well, just because, I mean, if you look at the USC struggles, I mean, they happen against a good defensive team. Utah is a good defensive team. So I'm going to go with them. I just think that fundamentally they're just a better team across the board than USC. I've gone over to Tony's side. I just really down on the Trojans and Lincoln Riley's whole style, his emphasis on just offense over everything and neglecting the defense. And I think it's kind of hurt the program. And I think it hurts a lot of programs. I think Alabama's been, going back to them, and it's hurt them as they went more towards the offense. They lost a little bit of their defensive identity. And I think that could definitely be the case with USC, whereas Utah is very much about its defense, very much playing, strong fundamental football, winning at the line of scrimmage. So I'm going to pick Utah in this game.
If this game was at Utah, it wouldn't be much of a debate for me. Obviously, it'd be a different spread, but I think Utah would win straight up. But it's not, and Utah is much tougher to beat at Utah than it is on the road. So I have come around on, obviously, Tony's USC are frauds, and I think it was proven right on Saturday against Notre Dame. I mean, I don't think that
I'm so scared about it. Now, we've just victory lapped this so hard that everything Andrew's about to say is going to be true, and USC is going to boat race Utah. So, sorry.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Spoiler alert. I still don't think they're a 4 or 5 loss team yet. I have not come around on that idea yet. And I thought last week that Notre Dame was going to bounce back after a, basically life getting sucked out of them loss against Louisville. Just everything went wrong. The thing that gives me courage is encouraging about USC was that their best player was why they lost that game. Caleb Williams was terrible. He's not terrible very often. He was terrible in that game. I don't think he'll be terrible again against Utah's top-ranked rushing defense, which that's not really what USC does. They're not a run-first team, so I don't know if that is some neutralizing factor against USC. Utah is the 109th ranked scoring offense. They scored 21.7 points per game.
Yeah, but Utah has 22 sacks this year, the 7th in the country. Notre Dame created some issues with the pressure that they got. That offensive line looked pretty bad against Notre Dame. I think.
Yeah,
it's going to be tough sledding for Caleb Williams again.
And Utah's already lost to Oregon State, and after this at USC, they got to go to they have to play Oregon. They
have a brutal schedule.
They got to win it right now.
I don't think this Utah team is as good as the Utah team last year, for example.
I think you're right.
21-7. We're kind of building in past Utah teams to they're ground and pound, and you don't want to mess with Utah. They're scoring 21.7 points per game. I mean, you just can't win that many games doing that. And like you said, Reiner, if their defensive line ends up overpowering Caleb Williams and their offensive line, I won't be shocked. But at least he can run a little bit and escape some of that pressure. And he can't be worse than he was last week. So and I don't think Utah is as good as Notre Dame, especially not on the road. So I'm going with USC in this one.
All right, that's fair enough. I think that was as all over the board as we've been. No unanimous selections on any of these games, which is good. And
real quick, Tony,
yo.
Do you know how you said sometimes you look at a line and you can feel that Vegas wants you to bet on them? Everybody and their brother is going to look at that USC Utah game after last week's game, like, I'm giving up 6.5 points if I bet on USC.
I did have a little of that.
Everyone's like, easy money. Utah 6.5. I'm getting 6.5 points. This has a 7 to 10 point win written all over it.
But is Utah a Joe Public team? I don't think they are. I thought that at first, but here it's the other way. Here it's the other way. I went full circle, and what you're saying is, Caleb Williams at home, and I don't even have to cover a full just a touchdown. Oh, easy. I mean, they got that. I don't know. And this is why we have no idea. And you know this is going to be. I mean, it's going to be a tie. It's going to be an overtime, right? And then it's just going to be. And then USC is going to score first. It's like, are they going to get the 2 or not? Or it'll be right on the line as it often is. And we'll be texting about it the whole way. So, all right, good work as always, friends. And then after this, next week will be a 1 episode week. It is our bye week. Reiner, I hope you have big plans. I hear my dog howling downstairs. That's my sign to get out of here. As always, thanks to Editor-in-Chief Nicole Avery Nichols, Executive Editor Anjanette Delgado, Sports Editor Kirkland Crawford, Audio Engineer Robin Chan, and the man you just heard from, Sports Editor and Show Producer Andrew Birkle. Everybody have a good Michigan State game, a good rivalry game. Be safe if you're going to the game, and have fun. We'll talk to you next week. This is Hail Yes.